Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let us start our annual series of press conferences running up to our AGM. Today we're going to discuss Gazprom's power generation strategy. The press conference is hosted by Denis Fedorov, Head of Directorate, CEO of Gazprom Energo Holding. So now let me hand over to Denis Fedorov, after which we will be happy to take your questions. Denis Fedorov. Hello, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will try to cut the long story short and briefly comment upon the intro presentation to invest more time in addressing your questions afterwards. So, now key metrics. Power generation this year increased. Heating output was also somewhat up. This is clear that this is the result of weather conditions. Our revenue was considerably up. EBITDA jumped up as well in 2016. We introduced a number of new power units, including Troitsk TPP, Novocherkassk TPP. Respectively, these were 660 megawatt steam turbine and 330 megawatt steam turbine respectively. Chinese equipment, highly automated units, facilities. It is operating with some operational issues of the early production cycle, so to speak, and we're working to address it. And we also introduce some coal-based power units. So there are some issues and bottlenecks of a regular routine nature in their operation, but I think we will address them in the coming 6 months. In Troitsk again, at Troitsk TPP is 330 megawatts, working on a circulating boiling layer. All early issues have been addressed and now it's fully operational. The unit is working seamlessly. Last year we launched a full-scale project to deliver Grozny TPP with a capacity of 360 megawatts. So by mid-2017 we are going to complete the construction of 2 gas turbines of 50 megawatts each in St. Pete at the central CHPP. Since the CHPP is in the center of St. Petersburg, it's about a lot of reconnection works, and we will be continuing to do that before September. However, in the nearest future, a bit ahead, we will launch the power unit itself. Next page provides our changes in power output and heat output broken down by company. All the numbers are obvious, so let me skip the page. Now, next page, key financial metrics. According to local GAAP, Russian accounting standards, here you can see that all the financial metrics of Gazprom Energo Holding are quite strong. We're growing well all across the board in terms of net income of Gazprom Energo Holding. We were up 65.5%, which is immense. Now, leverage. This was our first year when we started deleveraging, and our dividend payments will be linked to reducing debt. As I said, we do not consider any large-scale new capex projects. There are no investment prerequisites for that in the market. The established market for power and capacity does not provide some attractive fundamentals for new investment in power generation, so we focus on dividend payments to shareholders and deleveraging. As you can see, in 2016, our debt was down from 157.7 billion rubles to 144 billion rubles. Now, dividend. I think this is the last question that hasn't been addressed up to date for Mosenergo and TGC1. We are recommending that 25% of IFRS net income is paid out as dividend, based on a decision from a meeting with CEO. For OGC2, we're going to pay out 25% of local GAAP for the only reason, because for OGC2, 25% of local GAAP net income is higher than IFRS net income payout would be. As to our leverage, debt to EBITDA, you can see that Mosenergo and TGC1 are very good in terms of leverage, and OGC2 has a higher leverage ratio, but still within an acceptable range. So our core focus now is to deleverage and pay out substantial dividends to shareholders. We are well on track with our cost optimization program. We focus on import substitution, non-core asset disposal. We still do have some non-core assets in our books, mainly with MOEC and Mosenergo. This is clear that the market is not too good for selling non-core assets now, but we do not have the task to sell non-core assets at any cost by all means, so we try to do it in the most efficient, economically efficient way. Now our core developmental priorities. We are now going to update Gazprom's power generation strategy. We're now active working on it. If a new CSI capacity supply agreement decisions are taken, we will be happy to jump in and invest into new projects, provided there are strong economic fundamentals in the industry. However, as yet we do not see any concrete steps towards that from federal executive authorities. We understand that we need to keep the income and revenue in the sector, in the CSA pool, so to speak. There shall no be revenue income migration, but as yet there are no specific decisions. So then OPEX and CAPEX optimization is on track. We are withdrawing capacities gradually. By 2022, we have an approved decommissioning program of 1 gigawatt of capacity. We are engaged in capacity construction projects in Serbia, constructing power plants for the power of Siberia. We are now constructing a substation, a big substation, which is necessary over there, and we are working on phase 1 of a power plant for Amur gas processing plants. Now we're running stage 1 of this power plant construction project. Again, we have some core asset acquisition targets, but as yet there are no interesting offers on the table and no negotiations underway. We are certainly keeping a close eye on the Russian power industry in terms of possible M&As, asset acquisitions, but as yet there is no subject to discuss. International projects, as I have already said, we are engaged in power plant construction of Pančevo, Serbia. We are still negotiating on equipment selection. Yesterday I met representatives of Siemens and Metco. Metco is the Greek company, the winning bidder for the construction project, so a final decision is pending in terms of which level of capacity that power plant will have. I hope Metco will soon start work on the project as the final decision is taken within the coming week. We are paying great attention to dividend payouts. A lot of questions are asked about these aspects. If I'm not mistaken, next page is about dividends. So our dividend has been grown year after year, and certainly deleveraging through operating cash flow from CSA facilities commissioned. CSA again stands for Capacity Supply Agreements. So where's dividend? Oh, I've already shown this page to you. So in Mosenergo and TGC1 and OGCT, so we have reported growth. In Mosenergo, we are going to pay about 3.4 billion rubles in dividend, up year on year. In TGC, we paid 937, and this year we're going to pay 1.3 billion. For TGC, we are going to pay 174 million. Which is up year on year as well. I understand this audience has some representatives of regional media. Certainly we do have some burning issues in the heating markets of St. Pete. Some issues are still outstanding, unaddressed, and we do not see any real solutions to those issues to be applied in the short term. Probably the debt is not growing at the previously fast pace, but still we understand that the issue is quite burning. Overdue debt stands at 6.1 billion rubles, including 4.2 billion rubles attributable to managing companies with the participation of city authorities. These are our core debtors. Our investment program for 2017 has just 2.4 billion rubles for investment earmarked within the tariff, within the pricing. However, really, we spend more because we invest in projects and design projects to have some visibility for 2 or 3 years ahead, to be able to work with clear numbers and clear documents. So the investment component we're getting through the power tariff is not enough to cover these investment needs. We do need heavy investment, and we do need much better payment discipline. However, unfortunately, sadly, although we are constantly negotiating with stakeholders and everything is clear to all the parties involved, but everything ends up with negotiations and signing off papers, minutes and documents. So no specific outcomes are on the table as yet for St. Pete's burning issues. As for systemic matters and issues faced by the industry, those first maintaining the investment component, GRR in the energy, and avoidance of migration of GRR to green energy and nuclear energy, is thermal and combined cycle power generation is the core of the Russian energy balance, energy mix and energy supply. By the way, heating is a much more socially sensitive product, commodity, than electric power, because we are a cold country, and the CSA program has brought about a number of substantial advantages to upgrade some considerable part of the Russian capacities, but this is not where we shall where we should stop. I think this investment program has got to be continued and expanded, and I hope federal executive authorities will take relevant decisions for us to launch a program to upgrade the capacities and to maintain the capacities. There are burning issues with coal generation in the Central European part of Russia, very low price, like in gas-based generation, certainly cash costs of coal-based generation high, capacity withdrawals are high, and I think this can jeopardize the energy security of Russia, and we do need a solution here. Another problem of federal level is coal supply issues at Novocherkassk TPP. We face coal shortages. We are getting coal of inferior quality. We are adding natural gas to that coal, which makes the use of coal economically unfeasible at the Novocherkassk TPP. Besides, the supply volumes are 60% of what we have in contracts. So there are some suppliers who deliver just 10% against our orders, our tickets under the contract. However, during the tendering season, all local coal suppliers submit their bids and scrutinize every kopeck of pricing and every ton of coal to be supplied. But when it comes to real supply, real deliveries, nothing happens, and we are facing coal shortages. I escalated the issue to the Rostov region governor, to the Ministry of Energy, and I know they had a number of meetings in the ministry. And last winter, we did have a serious concern in terms of maintaining required amounts of coal stocks. Now, this is not the way to go. I think I cannot blame just coal companies because I have no objective evidence at hand, but I reckon the coal that is earmarked for our contracts is just exported, and we are getting coal of an inferior quality. It's not like soil or waste rock, but it's not the coal of the quality which is specified in the contract and which must be used for this type of TPP. We even returned some cargoes of coal due to its inferior quality. So the situation with coal supply is quite challenging these days. To repeat, we are even thinking of constructing the second stream of gas pipeline to Novocherkassk TPP to avoid a possible situation in which we will just fail to meet Energy Ministry prescribed requirements of maintaining coal stocks, which may lead to administrative and even criminal liability. I understand the situation. The situation is not the way to go. However, we cannot influence it. As yet, I don't know who can influence it. I have talked to all the shareholders of the company who supply. I have talked to all shareholders of companies who supply coal to Novocherkassk TPP, and the rest of some companies are not delivering to their contracts in terms of volumes. But as I said, if we deliver the second gas pipeline stream, we will just give up coal to the exception of the new 330 megawatt power unit delivered. I understand we consume around 60% of all the coal produced in the Rostov region, or maybe even more than 60%. So this will likely lead to some social issues with local coal miners. The situation is quite challenging. We are capable of delivering a gas pipeline. We are not talking about the price, the costs, economic feasibility of pipeline construction, but we are now talking about safe and secure operation of the power plant, of the thermal power plant locally. In winter, some suppliers of coal were delivering less than 10% of the amounts ordered. For example, the Bukhovskaya mine, or Bukhovskaya or Bukhovskaya, if I pronounce this correctly. So the Bukhovskaya coal mine is in receipt of our contract termination request because of repeated failures to deliver against the contract. I hope the situation will find its solution, but as yet this is a really burning issue, which is in our list. Talking about main issues of 2016 is the continuation of the bad debt story in St. Pete, regardless of repeated meetings, minutes, protocols and documents. We do not see any real improvement of the situation in terms of overdue debt collection, and at OGC 2 we do have quite a burning issue with coal supply. So this is basically it on my part, and now I will be happy to take your questions. Questions, please. Interfax. Hello. In your presentation, you said that dividend had been growing retrospectively across all the subsidiaries. Could you please give us some guidance for 2017? Shall we expect any growth, and which share of net income will be paid out for subsidiaries? Mr. Fedorov, we have a clear instruction of our parent company to pay at least 25% of the IFRS net income. So, based on this, we make our calculations. So, the 25% is the floor, the minimum, which we're going to pay anyway. As for specific numbers, 2017, we'll see our financials for 2017, then benchmark it against our debt level and decide how much dividend we will pay. So it's too early to say now how much exactly we'll pay out. Certainly not less than 25% on the IFRS. Follow-up. And in absolute numbers, will your dividend be growing, Mr. Fedorov? Well, as you see, our financials are quite strong this year, so first we need to see the finals, the final actuals. Certainly our priority is to increase the level of dividend in absolute terms. Question from Reuters. Journalist, just a follow-up on dividends, if I may. Why 25% of IFRS net income back in 2016? You were talking about possibly 35% under IFRS. 35, not 25. And could you please also give some guidance on financials for 2017? Mr. Fedorov, as yet we don't have all the required internal approvals, so let me now abstain from giving any estimates for 2017. I think by June we will finalize all the open questions and update you through a formal press release on our forecast and guidance. Now, why 25%? We believe that 25% is the right balance between deleveraging and dividend payouts to shareholders. So the income we get goes in two directions. First, reducing debt burden and dividend payouts. So we have taken a decision to strike the right balance through this 25% minimum payout ratio. So we'll pay out dividends and continue systemic work to reduce the debt of our subsidiaries. A follow-up. How much are you planning to deleverage in full year 2017, and which instruments are you going to use for that? Speaking off the mic. Evgeny Zemlinoy, CFO. In April, we have cut debt by 20 billion rubles for Mosenergo and TGK1, and also we are going to reduce debt by another 10 billion rubles before the end of the year on a high level, like approximately. We're going to fund this through our cash flow. Q1 was quite strong. Besides, we're optimizing our capex plan. We're taking out less debt currently. Further questions? Mr. Fedorov. So we are deleveraging through our free cash flow. A question from Viewport. In the Murmansk region, there is a comprehensive investment plan to upgrade the heat supply system through the year 2030. Its priorities vary from city to city. In particular, one of the boiler houses is going to migrate to coal, and you are saying that there are coal issues in the central part of the country. Is this the case with Murmansk? So what do you think about prospects of upgrade, coal supply, and so on? Besides, this is the year of environment, so what is being done to reduce environmental footprint in the regions, and in the Murmansk region particularly? Denis Fedorov, we have negotiated this matter with the governor, and we earmarked a big amount of money, maybe 150 million rubles, to protect the local environment in Murmansk. Around 300 million rubles is earmarked for fuel discharge system. This is a burning issue set as a priority by the governor. When fuel oil is discharged into the system, the odor is very intense. So we're going to introduce a closed cycle there to address this matter. So we're now purchasing the equipment, and I think we will get done before mid next year. As for migration to coal, I can say based on my own experience, and I have a good track record with coal, working with coal companies, not just at Novocherkassk TPP, but at other generation assets of Gazprom Energy Holding. So, unless there is a clear-cut contract with specific pricing, not formula, but specific pricing set forth, I think it's too risky to get engaged in such projects, unless there is a clear-cut contract. Besides, Murmansk is a coal transshipment hub for exports. So when we were considering possible migration of the power plant from fuel oil to coal, we took into account the volatility of coal exports, export prices minus transportation costs. So economically, this is a very risky project, and against the backdrop of power and capacity pricing, and by the way, in power generation is just a peanut, like 12 megawatts, mainly it's about heat. So if we add an investment component into the local tariff, into the local price, and it's going to be probably too high. So they've got to be very careful about it, because the tariff is already high in Murmansk. So provided coal supply companies guarantee good coal deliveries at a good price, then that's good. But unfortunately, my personal experience shows that it may be a risk with coal companies. I understand they're interested, And I know that coal companies are advocating this project in terms of the feasibility of constructing a coal-based power plant in Murmansk, but I believe there may be some risks, probably with not coal supply, but with coal pricing. And besides, projecting cash flows for 10, 12 years is very challenging because coal generation investment is not going to pay off in 3 or 5 years. So I would be very careful about this project. We discussed and tested possible options like that, but we never took that decision. Now our focus is addressing environmental issues, and our next priority is the condition of our equipment, and we understand that Murmansk is a large-scale and very responsible mission in terms of community heat supply, because Murmansk is a very cold city, and winter is very long locally, so we do keep a close eye on the technical condition of our power plant, or effectively boiler house, and we will keep investing in that. And as for environment, the core issue will be addressed mid-next year, as I said, because we just physically cannot address it earlier. Now we have ordered the equipment and now the delivery is in progress, so we do see that problem, we will address it. Next question from Delovoy, Peterburg. I have a question about St. Pete Heat Network. I understand the history of the company, the history of pricing and negotiations, and the purchase of TGC-1 shares by city authorities. I believe the city authorities may be intentionally striving for deteriorating of the technical condition of that asset to reduce its valuation to zero. I understand this is an overrated statement, but I understand anyway that the tear and wear of this company is 2.5 times higher than the standard level. So when are you going to be ready to give this asset to the city authorities free of charge, or even pay them something for them to take it from you, Mr. Fedorov? Well, we're a commercial arm's-length company. We do understand our huge scale of social responsibility, but still we're a commercial company. I believe that all our commitments in terms of establishing the heating network in St. Pete have been met, and we are still meeting we are still delivering to all our commitments. However, from the other side, from city authorities, we do not see a similar approach. I'm not talking about a faster pace growth of tariff, to which we agreed before. I'm just talking about the very basic things like good payment discipline to be exercised by companies directly controlled by the city authorities. So we repeatedly asked the city authorities to repay the debt to us, and we are saying that we are not going to spend this money on some outside investment or something. We are going to invest the money to improve the heating networks of the city itself, of St. Pete. So, transferring an asset free of charge, it's a fairy tale, and fairy tales are not real. We cannot do it under the law. Besides, the book value of the asset is quite high, and if we transfer it free of charge, it will lead to some losses, or accounting, even purely accounting losses. But anyway, it will impact dividend paid to majority shareholder and minorities. So I don't think this is the way to go. I think we have suggested a totally correct scheme for us to get out of the asset. That's about taking heat facilities and using as equity injections to increase the share to 75 or 100%. So we will not require any cash from the city. So we can just take the assets and inject and use them as equity injection in the framework of an additional share issue. So financially, this is not a hindrance, this is not a bottleneck to anyone, but unfortunately today even this question cannot be addressed for a variety of reasons. Let me skip specific examples and names, but the story is really weird. I think we are managing to keep the heat supply situation at an acceptable level, but generally I believe a city like St. Pete has got to have a heating system that is on par with the history of the city, with its status on the federal level, where we operate in heat supply. For example, in Moscow, I see a totally different approach from authorities. Even the mayor of Moscow holds regular meetings to discuss preparation for heating season and so on. And deputy mayors do that even more often and actively. In Murmansk, for example, the governor is keeping a very close eye on everything that is connected with heat supply. I meet the governor very often, and TGC1 CEO also meets the local governor very often. So everyone is focused on heating. In St. Pete, everyone understands and accepts everything. Everyone signs off meeting minutes, but in reality nothing happens. I don't think they are really trying to kill this asset, reducing its value to zero, and on top we're not going to let anyone do so, but the situation must not stay as is. Heating networks have got to be improved to a normal level. Like 2 or 3 billion rubles of investment program for St. Pete is just not enough. In Moscow, as the similar investment program has the budget of 14 billion rubles. Last year it was 7 billion rubles. Before it was into 1 billion rubles. So the numbers are totally different. Volumes are huge. In Moscow the market is big and the tariff is higher. And it must work the other way around. If the market is smaller, the tariff has got to be higher. And in St. Pete, between St. Pete and Moscow heating grids, there is a big difference between tear and wear of heating networks. So I think the local authorities have got to be much more focused on these kinds of issues. Thank you. Further questions? Question from Commerçant. Just an addition on heat networks. You said that this year the tariff has 2.4 billion rubles as an investment component and you really invest 3.1 billion rubles. The difference is 700 million. So the question is, during how many years will Gazprom be ready to invest its own money in heating? And the second question relates to actual finalization, completion of CSA program for TGC1, when are you going to actually commission the power plant, and how much have you invested in CSA for TGC1? How much are you going to get as return on the investment, and how can you compare this expected amount with the original target, and do you see any financial risks in terms of CSA? As for heavy investment from TGC1 and Heaton networks. We must minimize this amount because the heat network itself cannot bear huge investment obligations on top of the tariff, so the investment program uncovered by tariff has been reducing year after year. Next year it will further reduce, I think. I mean, the gap between the actual tariff and our real investment in the heat network. I think now we are at a no-return point. There are several possible solutions. Anti-monopoly services. I understand these decisions are not too publicly announced, so to speak, not announced broadly. So, physical reallocation of costs between power and heat starting next year would be quite good, so probably this option will work. That would be a good stimulus for TGC1 in terms of additional sources of funding, and probably there will be some cash not accounted for within the tariff. So we hope all prescriptive orders by the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service will be met and fulfilled by the local city authorities. As for CSA, Capacity Supply Agreement Program, we do not see any risks. The power plant is relatively expensive. I mean, the central CHPP is located right in the center of St. Pete, so it's subject to a number of limitations and restrictions on construction, reconnection of consumers. So it's cost us more than the standard capex. As for actual numbers, all the construction projects amount to like 100 billion rubles. We see no risks there. CSA is a clear-cut mechanism that's totally transparent, free of any debt that may emerge in the Northern Caucasus from some other local supply companies, so we see no risks. We have delivered to all our commitments under CSA, and the same approach is exercised by federal executive authorities, to the exception of day-ahead markets, sports markets, and I talked about it at the meeting before the May holidays. Not all income on power plants commissioned before 2012 have been subject to day-ahead market tariff recalculations. The calculations have got to be made, but they haven't been made for some of the power plants. According to the respective government order, those that lost income has got to be compensated for through the capacity supply agreement. For newer power plants commissioned post-2012, the recalculations are being made, but not for the older power plants. In total, the ballpark number is maybe 4 gigawatt-hour of capacity, subject to recalculation. The minister, I think, will include this into the order for Ministry of Energy, so we're now working on it, and we see no other risks in terms of CSA. Question from Krasnoyarsk TPP2. As your strategy is being, power generation strategy is being updated, I understand you are drafting an equipment upgrade program. Which power plants are going to be included to that program within TGC2? Our installed capacity ratio is in excess of 50%. We have good supply of coal. Coal is good, but we need some equipment upgrades. This is my first question. My second question is, what, what's your guidance about power consumption growth in Russia? Denis Fedorov, starting with your second question, I don't think power consumption will grow too dramatically. Raw US used to project like 4% year on year some time ago. At that time, I did believe that it was too high. It targets, I think it's going to grow very moderately, within 1% approximately. Locally, here and there, in this or that region, there may be some consumption hikes in terms of electricity, but I do not expect huge growth. All in all, it's like 1% or 1.5%, or probably 2%, but not more. Since 2011, 2012, electric power consumption has been virtually flat with no major hikes. I mean, if we talk about Russia as whole. As for the Krasnoyarsk TPP, this is one of the core bread-winning power plants. For as I understand, we have two coal suppliers for that TPP in Krasnoyarsk. And since we have already faced some issues with coal at Troitsk TPP, we failed to recover this coal-based thermal power plant. As for Krasnoyarsk TPP2, we will invest in it because it's a donor power plant. Stanislav will give you more details. This is CEO of GC2. Yeah. So we have two priorities set forth by the company. Surgut and Krasnoyarsk power plants are our top priority donor power plants. So we have a certain vision in terms of positions of the system operator and the Ministry of Energy. So these power plants are high on our agenda, so we will negotiate specific measures with executive power authorities. Next question comes from Troitsky TPP press service. It was in the press that possibly Troitsk TPP would be sold to Fortum. So can you comment upon it? Is such a deal possible in the near future? Denis Fedorov. Well, first, we have always been saying that something that money cannot buy, very big money can buy. So again, to repeat my statement at a relevant meeting, a lot of prospective buyers come in, or prospective sellers. There are some offers of buy or sell some assets. I haven't seen any announcements, any news about possible Troitsk TPP sale in the press. I haven't seen anything like that in the media, although I'm an attentive media reader. Well, there are constantly some buy or sell offers coming in. This is just our routine. For example, recently there was news that Mr. Deripaska wants to buy out the cascade of VIX HPPs. In my opinion, the justification, the explanation, the rationale of that purchase is not too strong. That's not enough to buy out the cascade of HPPs. So we refused that. We thought that the buyout, the previous purchase of Omsk HPP was not feasible. So in terms of this VIXA cascade, such a deal is not reasonable, I think. This was established for a reason, structured with certain assets and connections between them. So now, taking the company in parts, in pieces, is not good. Probably it can be funny and exciting to someone, but for us it's not going to be good in terms of our heat supply commitments taken on in some regions. I don't think this should be done. Mr. Deripaska, I understand, bought Omsk HPP to support the adjacent aluminium smelter, but I understand the plant reduced the output dramatically, so Rusal failed to address the task for which they bought that power plant. So I don't think any experiment with TGC-1, Karelia, Murmansk, Leningrad region, St. Pete is not a good practice. No experiments shall be staged in such serious entities. So there are talks, there are maybe some rumors, but there are no specific steps. So I cannot confirm any sale of Troitsk TPP. Further questions? Next question from Ria Novosti. A couple of questions. Could you please clarify on MOEC dividend? Are you going to pay any dividend MOEC for 2017? In 2016 the company recorded some profit, but no dividend was paid. My next question is, do you have any estimated valuation of Troitsk TPP? Is there a price at which you could be ready to sell that power plant? And besides, how big may be the cost of laying the gas pipeline stream to Novocherkassk TPP? Mr. Fedorov, first, the gas pipeline. This is just a preliminary estimate arrived at without valuing the underlying land plots, so the ballpark number is within 1 billion rubles to deliver that pipeline stream. But again, this is not just guesstimation, but it is net of some important material side factors that can emerge when you launch an actual project of constructing the pipeline. So this is got to be further analyzed, and unless we see the coal supply situation is improving, we will have to take such a decision. So this is last question. Now another question. We have no indicative estimates as to the valuation of Troitsk TPP at which we could sell it. There are conventional valuation methods like discounted cash flow method. So this is a new power unit of 660 megawatts, and the new coal-based power unit is the core driver of the TPP's value. Then the cash flow of TPP is clear-cut and transparent because this is based on coal. No cash withdrawals are made due to bad debt or something. So everything is clear-cut, but we haven't estimated such a number. So it's hard to answer your question directly. MOEC this year we are not paying dividend. Next year we'll see what we'll have, but most likely we are not going to pay a dividend for 2017 either, because we have an array of projects we are to deliver to boost the reliability of heat supply in Moscow, to protect the consumers. So there are some characteristic features to that company, that project. So we are actively working on optimization within the company. Back in 2013, the company recorded 13 billion rubles of losses. Now we have 0.6 billion in the greens. I hope in 2017 we will further improve the financials of MOEC. and as soon as we are in the normal mode of operation, which is the case with Mosenergo, OGC2, if and when we have a good visibility of no serious risks to be faced within coming 2 or 3 years, then we'll start paying dividends. So I think we'll need a couple of years to start doing that. Thank you for the questions. Question from Interfax. Mr. Fedorov, you said that probably you would be interested in new project post CSA program. And what about the new terms and conditions for Taman, for example? Are you interested in that competitive procedure? Mr. Fedorov, no, we are not going to bid for Taman. A follow-up question. Post your investor day, there was some information that minorities of Gazprom Energy Holding subsidiaries are interested in exiting projects like Fortum and others. Do you have any negotiations in progress? Denis Fedorov. After we talk to analysts, the content of our talks are often transformed in a weird way to some weird comments and conclusions. We're always saying that Fortum and the Moscow government, under some economic assumptions, terms and conditions, may cash out, may leave the company. But and besides, I'm constantly saying that we have an effective control in those companies, so we do not see any prerequisites to pay big money for that. So certainly there are some rumors or talks from time to time. Would you like to buy out our stake? If you would, then at what price, and so on. But there are no formal, no official negotiations. There is no clear-cut official position of view. The question was like that. An analyst asked, can they cash out? I said, well, they probably can, but we haven't made any offers to buy out their stakes. And after that talk with analysts, the content of it is transformed in a weird way to some strange conclusions, and I sometimes read and hear something that I never said in meetings, in talks with analysts. You know, analysts are interesting people. They have to earn on some insider information, so sometimes they write it, they throw it away to the markets, probably to earn on it, but we have never made any offer to Fortum or Moscow government on any cash out, buyout of their stakes. That has never been the case. The next question from Reuters. Mr. Fedorov, as for your upgrade program, there is a question, or a couple of questions rather. So first, which mechanisms or investment incentives for upgrade are on Gazprom Energy Holdings' agenda? What would you like to have? What incentives would you like to have? Are there any negotiations in this respect with the government and federal executive authorities? And do you believe such mechanisms or incentives could be found in the near future? And which assets would you include into that upgrade program? And another question also about upgrade. Yesterday, there was a meeting of Committee for Import Substitution, and it was said that by autumn, the 110 turbine made in Russia would be piloted. It was said that that turbine had very promising outlook for the local power industry. So what's your opinion on that? And it was also said that probably an investment contract would be signed between Interrail, Rosnano and Gazprom on that turbine. So could you please give us some color on that? Mr. Fedorov, again, we have not even discussed any memoranda. Several weeks ago, we won a court litigation for 1.2 billion rubles on that turbine. The litigation was with Saturn. That turbine is now at the Ryazan TPP. I have never talked talked about it to any ministry representatives. I have never talked to industry ministry with that. The turbine was delivered in December last year, and it's quite easy to draw your conclusions of that turbine. If I'm not mistaken, they manufactured just 6 turbines of that kind in Russia, so we can do anything with it. We talked to Mr. Novak about it, energy minister, before our recent meeting. We had an informal meeting with several leaders of power generation companies to discuss the current context, and our joint position was that we were ready, and we are ready and willing to accept homemade equipment. I'm not talking about that 110 megawatt turbine, but we are ready and willing to accept homemade equipment, but we need some prerequisites for that. First, no fines, because if we buy some equipment and this piece of equipment doesn't work, if I'm not mistaken, we commissioned that unit in 2010, and it worked since 2010. It was in operation for just 5 or 6 months in total. When Siemens delivers a 100 megawatt turbine during 10 months, and it took us several years to repair that homemade turbine, and there are no fines. So homemade import substituted units can be used, but it's got to be reasonable. Interrail has 4 turbines, and they will possibly improve them because they have no choice. But the fact that nothing has improved since 2010 is quite telling. The problem is this Russian equipment doesn't have enough experience. So if fines are cancelled, it will probably incentivize investment into that equipment. Besides, we have 150 and 160 megawatt turbine in St. Peter, and the problem is that the hot part hasn't been transferred by Siemens, and it hasn't been localized in Russia. This is the core issue there. So no doubt, if a mechanism to upgrade is developed, and that upgrade mechanism covers a significant amount of generation capacities, I think it can incentivize international manufacturers to transfer hot tracked technologies to Russia, because localization in Russia has got to be 100%, especially for the 150 to 180 megawatt turbines. I don't think it's about some rocket science or some innovative trade secrets, because those turbines have been manufactured for several dozens of years, so this hot pot can be localized in Russia, no problem, I believe. That's number one. Number two, it seems to me that strategically we are not doing the right thing. We're trying to catch up with something. That 110 megawatt turbine has been out there for 20 years. So this was invented like 20 years ago, and we are now trying to improve a 20-year-old piece of equipment. Probably our task has got to be striving for some advanced developments. Like we could look what they have in the West and try and innovate something they don't have, but trying to improve an invention which is 20 years old, I don't think is the right thing. Besides, Siemens is ready to manufacture 150 and 180 megawatt turbines here locally in Russia, and Interrail with GE, as I know, are doing turbine manufacturing for Russia. And besides, first you've got to measure the prospective demand before you deliver some piece of equipment. Inventing and manufacturing something with the hope that it will probably meet some market demand is not the right way to go. Alexei has worked a lot for power machines, and he is saying that at least 10 gas turbines have got to be manufactured per year for that to be economically feasible. So, again, I haven't heard about any memoranda. I understand we are not taking part in any. Interrail and Rosnano are working with Saturn, I know, but I also know that we are still failing to get one good operational turbine for Resign TPP, although we obtained it actually back in 2010. As for the amounts of upgrade, I cannot give you any numbers because as yet we cannot see any clear-cut decisions or proposals. I can say that there are some discussions. I'm sure it will be subject to some arm's-length competitive mechanisms, although we do not yet understand those mechanisms, so it's too premature to talk about any volumes of upgrade. I can say there are two basic ideas. We support one, we support the other one less. One idea is that we suggest increasing capacity payment for Zone 1, price in Zone 1, and within those additional money to be obtained, we will, in return for the additional money, we will take on responsibilities to repair and upgrade the equipment of our choice, because we know our painful spots better. The task is clear-cut, so you pay for capacity, you calculate how much money you pay and how much money you receive, you understand how much money you have, and you earmark this for upgrade here and there. Idea number two is when you draft terms and conditions similar to CSA and start competitive bidding procedures, but I just don't understand if you, for example, want to upgrade something in Moscow, who will be our competitive bidders, who can compete with us for some upgrades in Moscow. So we'll see which decision they will choose. I stake on the first idea, when extra money pools are identified in price in Zone 1, and that is used for equipment upgrades. As you said, some construction is planned in timeline, so I think parts shall go through CSA and part through capacity tariff markup to use this money to upgrade the equipment. As for capacity rate, that's on par with 2011, and spot market, day-ahead market is also virtually flat in terms of rates, pricing, and CPI is higher than the growth in power price in day-ahead market. So we are not getting any super high income, and we have no investment incentives to invest. We do understand our responsibility, we do realize how responsible we are and should be for seamless operation of our equipment, and we are earmarking cash, and we are investing in maintaining a good condition of that equipment. But when it comes to larger scale projects like replacement of 250 megawatt turbines in Moscow, you've got to replace once every 10 years, so before 2025 they have got to be replaced altogether. We have developed a turbine jointly with Renova, T290 megawatt turbine, and the project has been launched, and we will complete it regardless of the market conditions, because it is necessary for heat supply for community heat supply, including new consumers that are appearing in the Moscow region. CHPP 22 constructed power heat line in the direction of Liberty. The project is on the way. We need, however, to load the Ural engineering plant with some strong orders. We've got economic incentives, and in return we will take on responsibilities to replace the equipment that has got to be replaced. Question from Delovoy, Peterburg. A follow-up on the physical method of calculations for 2015. I understand next year there will be a migration to that. So which extra income do you expect for TGC1 from that migration, and to what extent payment for final consumers will change? So what's your tariff guidance, basically? Denis Fedorov. As yet I cannot comment upon tariff decisions of St. Pete city authorities. I can comment for anti-monopoly service decisions only. So we have got to migrate to physical methods. We have actually migrated to this physical method of calculation, physical method of allocation in 2016. So in 2016, 2017 and 2018 we will adjust technicalities of this method of operations. Denis Fedorov continues. City authorities of St. Petersburg wrote a letter to the management of Gazprom saying that to keep the price level for heating within the range prescribed by executive authorities, they needed extra subsidies of 2 billion rubles for TGC1. I don't think 2 billion rubles is way too big. So we have got actually two options. Either increase the tariff beyond the range prescribed by the anti-monopoly service. This is not a violation. There is a prescriptive order for that. Or option 2, subsidies from the city. And as yet we do not know how city authorities will address the situation. We have warned them several times that there are established court practices in this respect, and Fortum has had experience with such court litigations and such issues, so it makes no sense even to go to the court. Everything is clear-cut. For some reason, this appeared to be a surprise to everyone, although we had warned everyone several times before. For some reason, the prescriptive order of Federal Anti-Monopoly Service came as a surprise to everyone. I don't understand why. For me, the best decision would be just to adjust the budget and pay out 2 billion rubles if city authorities believe this is a sufficient number. As yet, we have not analyzed the numbers. Further questions? The question: under import substitution, are there any enterprises or plants constructed like in Zelenogorsk, in Divnogorsk, for example, to increase power consumption? I cannot comment upon that city, says Mr. Fedorov. We have plant manufacturing controllers. Now we are producing state-of-the-art Russian burners. Then last year we started producing relay and protection automated devices. Before it was never the case. We used to import it. Last year we started producing relay and protective automation equipment, and Gazprom Energy Holding has a 25% equity stake in the company producing that. Again, our task is not to substitute all imports 100%. We see our needs several years ahead in this or that type of products, and we see how possible it is to do something. In terms of chemical water treatments, we have some good technical solutions and we have some experience in applying them. We replace the membranes regularly, so we understand what we need and what we can deliver. As for highly technological production, everyone is saying, let's make turbines, let's make turbines. And I am saying, we don't need turbines. We need fan blades for turbines. If you deliver a plant in Russia to produce fan blades for turbines, we'll sign a contract with you, because I understand the demand will be quite strong, and it will, in terms of amounts, it will be higher than demand for turbines would be. So if there is interest from the side of, say, some investors, we are ready to support comfortable conditions for them to operate, because we have water, we have power, heating, gas, not in Krasnoyarsk, but we are ready and willing to work with prospective investors. Any further questions, colleagues? No further questions? Then thank you, everyone. Let's meet next time on Friday at 10 a.m. to discuss production matters. Thank you. This does conclude our press conference for today. Goodbye.